I find interesting is the trend towards applying an engineer's mindset to global problems, because it used to be a political mindset, but the actual answer generally is a pragmatic, cold hard look at a problem and find a solution. And it's nothing to do with politics, and that creates much better outcomes. I mean, again, the classic example of that is Bitcoin, right? When you want to reinvent a whole monetary system from scratch, that comes out.
My whole view with Bitcoin was always that it's much better to be pragmatic and lay out a moderate case, which is that it's a hedge in a portfolio against the sort of traditionalist financial infrastructure. And so many people would get mad because they would anchor on this extremist view that it had to be everything. It had to be the solution and panacea to everything. The problem with that view is that that's just not how you maximize demand, right? When you think about products that really get to scale, there's a simplicity, and what that simplicity gives is people a very simple decision to make. Do I want to use this or do I not want to use it? And so if you want, for example, Bitcoin to get to mass market scale, the most powerful thing that you can do is describe it in simple, pragmatic terms that don't require zealous belief. And so it's just an example to me that sort of reinforces this idea that extremism never wins, and kind of like centrism is sort of the value maximizing function.
Yeah, because when I'm looking at that whole world, I see all of the other platforms, blockchains, tokens, and I'm just thinking, okay, well, here's a big, diverse, deep, rich universe. And I can't just see it being about Bitcoin. Yes, Bitcoin's this great asset and it's a wonderful gift for us all, and thank you very much. We can all make some money. But this whole space, okay, that's super interesting to me, because it is anti-fragile in its overall way, and it offers a whole bunch of solutions to the problem of finance, which is a total shit show.
It's true. It just requires sort of like a de-escalated, like I find that a lot of people in Bitcoin, and it's so funny because like many of them got there well after I did. They're just so arrogant about it. And I don't know, maybe I'm just dumber, but like, I just don't understand why people need to believe so much versus, view it more pragmatically and unemotionally, because I think they'll find more success in the more unemotional, treatment of what it is. So like another example is like the entire DeFi movement. I got laughed at because somebody asked me, Laura Shin asked me what DeFi was. And I was like, I have no idea, but I own Bitcoin. And I was just telling the truth, which is like, I don't have the time to learn about all this stuff. And, at some point somebody will explain it to me and I'll know a little bit better, but it's not to say that it's not important, but it is to say that everything has a time and place. And if we are going to focus our energies on making Bitcoin mass market and scale, we have to dial down this zealous rhetoric and dial up pragmatist rhetoric. Pragmatist rhetoric is what will get your mother and your grandmother to have Bitcoin in their wallets.
That's right. I love Michael Saylor, and his interview's been amazing, and he's on Real Vision, but he speaks in a term that no corporate treasurer understands. They want to hear about hornet's nest or anything else. They want to hear about diversification of portfolio returns and stuff like that.
So to your point, look, I've started an insurance company that's doing a bunch of very, very esoteric, exotic insurance policies. And, one of the interesting things that I've learned with my co-founder, my partner in this, he's the CEO, I'm just the chairman, but is how many of these corporations view their balance sheets and, how they're buying all kinds of esoteric insurance. And the instant thing, Raul, that pops to the top of my head is, wow, these guys should also own Bitcoin as something like that. If they're going to own cat bonds and they're going to own business interruption risk insurance and all kinds of, hedges on PMI, my gosh, why don't they own some Bitcoin? Well, it's because the presentation of that idea is done in such a way where they're forced to make a leap too far. And because if you decompose what the treasurer or the CFO is how the lens in which they're making decisions, it's just career risk, right? It's that old adage. You're never going to get fired for buying IBM, right? And so you're never going to get fired for just having the money sit in a corporate account with earning zero at JP Morgan. Then, pounding your fists on the table for Bitcoin. So what we need is, again, more pragmatism around what it is. I've always found the presentation of the idea as a deeply fundamentally uncorrelated hedge to the existing financial infrastructure to be kind of boring, not that salacious, but very pragmatic and effective.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people want to get the institutions into the space, and I keep explaining to people, stop talking about libertarian philosophies and, all of this stuff. Everybody in the asset allocation space, the boring pension funds use something called BARA, BARRA. It's
Yeah.
an asset allocation model. You need to go and talk to them how it fits into the BARA model, and they'll go, oh, perfect, I'll speak to my trustees. It's as simple as that.
It's so boring, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, this is the boring sort of like, blocking and tackling that's required. And I think it's fine, I have different personas. We all have different personas. And, there are parts of my persona that are very extreme in certain views on certain topics in certain markets. But I've also learned that, there's a time and place for that. But then there's a time and place for just pragmatic product building, blocking and tackling, and reputation and trust when you're trying to get something to scale. Another example that I've been at the forefront of is in SPACs, right? If I was zealous about SPACs, you wouldn't have seen the change in the capital markets that we've seen in 2 short years.
What attracts you to SPACs? What attracts you to SPACs? What is it, apart from the fact that it's just easier to get something away and there's some interesting economics? What's so great about it?
The SPAC is really important. Well, I'll give you why it's important to me, and then I'll give you why it's important to an entrepreneur. Selfishly for me, it allows me to basically be a conduit and act as a principal while I take companies public, meaning I can use my balance sheet to basically empower companies to fulfill a mission that I believe and underwrite in. And then I can be a big part of them as they grow and scale. And so, the only places to make money in the private technology markets are all the way up front at the Series A, the Sequoias and the Benchmarks and the Andreessens of the world. I used to do that at Social Capital. We did a good job, but it's very hard and the returns are extremely long dated. Or you just wait for these companies to get baked and do it at the back end, where instead of putting in tens of millions, you put in hundreds of millions or billions if you're able to do it. And you own the same amount as they end up owning anyways, 10, 12, 15, 20%. And then you can basically help them grow and scale. So that's selfishly, why I was attracted to a SPAC. But then now you get into the Venn diagram part of why I liked it and why it makes sense for an entrepreneur. It's because you can talk about the future. And the most important thing in underwriting returns, as you and I know, in disruptive technologies, is all about future returns. I don't care about 2019 and 2018. Tell me about 2028 and 2029. What is your plan? And the only way that you can talk about that when you're bringing a company public is through an S4 process, because it's a merger, because the S1 process doesn't allow that. The SEC rules are very strict around, basically talking about future prospects, future strategy, future cash flows. You can't even produce a forecast. So the S4 and a SPAC, at the intersection between now my desires and the entrepreneur's desires, is about talking about the future in detail.